This story is titled, My Wife Called Saying She Found a Richer Man and We Need to Break Up. I simply said okay, then blocked all her accounts, took her money, canceled restaurant reservations, and sent her a bill for all the gifts I'd given her. The next day, my phone blew up with 52 missed calls from her and her parents. Hey, Reddit. My name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. I run a digital marketing agency that I built from absolutely nothing. And until recently, I was engaged to what I can only describe as the most ungrateful and delusional woman on the planet. This is the story of how everything unraveled and how my business background helped me turn a devastating breakup into the most satisfying legal victory of my life. I started my business when I was just 23 years old, armed with nothing but a used MacBook and crushing anxiety about whether I'd end up living in my car. My startup plan was beautifully simple. Step 1, don't die. Step 2, maybe profit. Those first few years were absolutely brutal. I'm talking 85-hour work weeks, surviving on instant noodles for every meal, and sleeping on my brother Kevin's couch because every dollar of rent money had to go back into keeping the business alive. Kevin is 32, works in construction, and has absolutely zero filter when it comes to giving his opinion about my life choices. When I first told him I was starting a marketing business, his exact words were, "Bro, you're going to market people on how to be broke? Because that's the only thing you're an expert at right now." Coming from a guy who once used duct tape as a car window, that comment hit harder than it should have. But Kevin's brutal honesty was exactly what I needed during those dark early days. Everything changed about 18 months ago when I finally landed some massive contracts. It turns out that optimizing social media campaigns actually pays crazy good money when you know what you're doing. Kevin's response to seeing my first big paycheck was typically understated. "Well, damn, maybe you do know something after all. Don't let it go to your head, nerd." Now I'm pulling serious cash, the kind of money where I don't even look at prices anymore. It was enough to finally get my own place, adopt my dog Biscuit, and finish the project Kevin and I had been working on for 3 years, restoring a 1969 Dodge Charger. We found that beauty rusted out in some guy's backyard, and Kevin convinced me we could bring her back to life. That car became our weekend therapy, nothing quite like inhaling paint fumes and arguing over carburetors to really bond two emotionally repressed men. Kevin handled all the bodywork while I obsessed over the engine specs. It took us almost 4 years, but now she's absolutely perfect. Midnight black paint, chrome bumpers, and a 440 big block engine that purrs like a very large, very angry cat. Every weekend spent working on that car was worth it when I finally heard that engine roar to life. Biscuit is a golden retriever who's about as smart as a box of rocks but twice as lovable. The shelter told me he was special and needed someone with patience. It turns out special meant he once got his head stuck in a cereal box and just accepted his fate instead of backing out. Honestly, I can relate to that level of resignation. That dog and I share the same brain cell, and it's usually on break. I met my now ex-fiancée Chloe 6 years ago when she was 26 and working as a receptionist at some stuffy law firm. But Chloe had bigger dreams. She wanted to be an art curator. This girl knew absolutely everything about Renaissance painters and could talk for hours about exhibition design. She had this incredible vision of working at prestigious galleries, curating shows that would matter. The problem was that dreams don't pay student loans, and the reality of her situation was weighing heavily on her. She was incredible back then, smart, passionate, and somehow able to make me care about some dead artist's brush techniques when my idea of culture was watching The Office reruns for the 100th time. When I first introduced Chloe to Kevin, he pulled me aside and said, "She's way too pretty for you." What's the catch? Classic Kevin, always cutting straight to the heart of things. Meanwhile, Biscuit immediately loved her because she gave him half her sandwich without being asked, which in his simple dog logic meant she was perfect. But here's where the story gets interesting, and where my business mindset really kicked in. About a year into dating, I made Chloe a deal that seemed perfect at the time. I told her to quit that soul-crushing receptionist job and focus on her art history degree. She could take unpaid internships, network her ass off, and build the career she really wanted. I would handle all the financial aspects. Here's the key part that everyone needs to understand. I wasn't just being some generous sugar daddy throwing money around. I'm a businessman, and when I invest in something, I document everything. Every major expense, every education payment, every career-building opportunity I funded for her future. I had it all tracked and recorded. Most importantly, I had her sign loan agreements for everything. Nothing crazy or predatory, just simple contracts stating the amounts and confirming that they'd be repaid if our relationship ended. Honestly, it was less about trust and more about making sure I didn't end up like those guys you read about on legal advice forums who spend years paying off their ex-yoga certification or underwater basket weaving degree. She signed everything without even bothering to read the terms. "It's just a formality, babe," she would say. "We're going to be together forever." She actually thought it was sweet that I was being official about our partnership. Some people write love letters. I wrote enforceable contracts with reasonable interest rates. Now here's where one of the main antagonists in this disaster enters the story. Chloe's best friend, Madison. Yes, that's her real name. And yes, she's exactly what you'd expect from someone named Madison. Picture purple hair, a nose ring, and the kind of person who says yikes unironically in actual conversations. Madison was working on her master's degree in gender studies and had strong opinions about absolutely everything, especially men and money. Madison hated me from day one, not because I was a bad guy or treated Chloe poorly, but because in her rigid worldview, any man with financial resources was automatically part of the problem. She would make these passive-aggressive comments during group dinners about late-stage capitalism and financial privilege, while simultaneously ordering the most expensive thing on the menu that I was obviously going to be paying for. Kevin met Madison exactly once, and his assessment was immediate. That girl has more red flags than a communist parade. The best part about Madison's lectures on economic privilege? She lived in a studio apartment that her parents paid for while she pursued her academic passion. But somehow, I was the problematic one for supporting my fiancé's dreams with clear, documented agreements. We got engaged last year after 5 wonderful years together. I proposed at this gallery opening she'd been excited about for months. It felt like the perfect setting for someone who lived and breathed the art world. I had the ring custom made with a sapphire because she'd always said diamonds were basic and predictable. That ring cost me $18,000, but seeing the look on her face when I got down on one knee was absolutely worth every penny. Madison's reaction to our engagement was exactly what you'd expect from someone who views marriage as a patriarchal conspiracy. "I hope you know what you're getting into, Chloe," she said, with that condescending tone she'd perfected. "Marriage is a patriarchal institution designed to control women's autonomy." Kevin's take on the proposal was characteristically blunt. 18 grand for a rock? I could buy a truck for that. But hey, at least now you'll have something to repo when this goes south. For 6 years, I genuinely thought I was building our future together. Once Chloe quit her receptionist job, she fully embraced the lifestyle upgrade that my success afforded us. The first major change was her living situation. According to Chloe, her studio apartment was embarrassing and didn't reflect where she was heading in her career. So I found this incredible uptown loft with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place that screams successful creative professional. The rent was $3,800 a month, and I signed a loan agreement covering the security deposit and first year's rent, totaling $29,000. Kevin helped me move some furniture to the new place, and his commentary was priceless. While carrying a $3,500 designer coffee table up 3 flights of stairs, he muttered, "This table costs more than my truck, and my truck actually does something useful." Biscuit was absolutely fascinated by the new apartment, mainly because he kept trying to fetch his tennis ball off the exposed brick walls and couldn't understand why it wouldn't bounce back like he expected. Then came the car situation. "I can't show up to gallery events on the bus," Chloe explained, which was actually a fair point given the networking requirements of her field. We got her a BMW X5 with a $650 monthly payment. Since her credit was essentially non-existent from years of student loans and entry-level wages, I had to co-sign while she signed the loan agreement. The total came to $17,500 over the lease term. Kevin's reaction when he first saw the BMW was predictably sarcastic. "Nice ride. Too bad she'll probably crash it into a Starbucks while texting about art feelings." The funny thing is, she always complained about my Charger taking up garage space at her apartment complex. "It's just sitting there," she'd say with genuine annoyance. "Why don't you sell it and get something practical?" Looking back, that should have been a massive red flag, asking me to sell something I'd spent years restoring with my brother. Something that represented our bond and my personal achievement. The wardrobe upgrade was next level because the art world is apparently all about image and first impressions. I gave her an $1,800 monthly clothing allowance so she could shop at Nordstrom, Saks, and those boutique shops that sell $350 scarves. Over the course of 6 years, I probably spent around $48,000 on clothes and accessories to help her look the part of a successful curator. But the biggest expense was her education. Art history master's degree, specialized courses, conference attendance, networking events, all the things necessary to build a legitimate career in her field. The total education costs came to $42,000, every penny documented and signed for in our loan agreements. Madison was a constant presence during all of this financial support, and her commentary was absolutely something else. She'd come over to Chloe's luxury apartment that I was paying for and lecture me about wealth inequality and how problematic it was that I could just throw money around while people are struggling. When I mentioned Madison's frequent visits to Kevin, he was incredulous. Let me get this straight. She comes to the apartment you pay for, eats the food you bought, uses the Wi-Fi you pay for, and then lectures you about money problems? That's some next-level audacity right there. When I pointed out that her parents were literally funding her entire graduate school experience, Madison insisted that was completely different because it was family money, not transactional relationship dynamics. The mental gymnastics required to maintain that position were truly impressive. Chloe's sister Jessica was equally toxic, but in a completely different way. She's 2 years older than Chloe, and somehow even more entitled, if that's possible. Jessica worked some made-up job at a startup that sold overpriced candles or something equally useless, but she acted like she was running Goldman Sachs. Kevin met Jessica at a family dinner once, and his verdict was immediate. That one's got main character syndrome. I bet she asks to speak to managers at McDonald's. But Jessica wasn't just offering commentary from the sidelines. She was actively asking for favors too. "Since you're already covering Chloe's car payment, could you help me with mine?" she asked one day with complete seriousness. "Just until my startup takes off." I always said no to these requests, which inevitably made Madison go on rants about male financial control tactics and how I was demonstrating toxic patterns of economic dominance. Chloe's lifestyle during this period was absolutely insane. Everything had to be organic from Whole Foods. Her art supplies came from boutique shops that charged premium prices for the exact same materials, and she had a gym membership at this place that included a spa and served free smoothies that probably cost more than most people's entire grocery budget. We had meal kit delivery services that cost more than what a family of 4 would spend eating out. And she took weekend trips to art shows in other cities, always flying and always staying at nice hotels. Madison would tag along on these trips sometimes, which was always an adventure in cognitive dissonance. She'd complain about wealth inequality while sipping champagne in first class and staying in hotels that cost $400 a night. For 5.5 years, this arrangement actually worked pretty well. Chloe was building genuine connections in the art world, gaining valuable experience, and getting closer to her dream job of working as a curator at a prestigious gallery. Madison kept poisoning the well with her feminist theory nonsense, but I figured it was just background noise that I could ignore. Looking back now, I realize Madison was probably in Chloe's ear the entire time, telling her she deserved better and that I was using financial leverage to control her. Wednesday was supposed to be special. It marked the 6-year anniversary of our first date, and I'd planned something absolutely perfect. I made reservations at this exclusive restaurant she'd been wanting to try for months, the kind of place where you need connections just to get a table. I'd also bought her this stunning sapphire bracelet to match her engagement ring, and I spent 3 hours picking it out to make sure it was exactly right. I left work early around 4:30 p.m. to surprise her. My plan was simple. Maybe we could grab coffee, talk about our future together, just spend some quality time before our dinner reservation. When I got to her apartment, she wasn't there, which wasn't unusual. She was probably at some gallery event or meeting with her academic advisor. I figured I'd wait around, maybe order some appetizers for when she got back. At 8:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was Chloe, and the message read, "I found someone else. I want nothing more to do with you. Don't contact me. That's it." 6 years together, thousands of dollars invested in our shared future, an engagement ring, a wedding we'd been planning. All of it ended with a text message that was shorter than most grocery lists. I sat there staring at my phone for probably 15 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My first instinct was to call her immediately and demand an explanation. I wanted to ask what the hell was happening, who this someone else was, how long this had been going on, and what about our engagement and all our plans. But then my business brain kicked in and started analyzing the situation objectively. Her message was crystal clear. Nothing more to do with you, combined with don't contact me. She wasn't asking for space or suggesting we take a break to figure things out. This was complete termination of our relationship, delivered without any room for negotiation or discussion. So I texted back exactly 2 words. As you wish. I immediately called Kevin and said, "Dude, I need to crash at your place tonight." "What happened?" he asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice. I read him the text message word for word. There was a long pause on the other end, then Kevin's response. "Holy shit. After 6 years and all that money, she breaks up with you via text? You're dodging a bullet, bro." I put my phone on silent, opened my laptop, and did what I do best. I solved a complex logistical problem with methodical precision. I wasn't just hurt. I was about to become her worst nightmare. I wasn't Batman, but I was Bruce Wayne with receipts. Here's where my business background really paid off. When you run a marketing agency, you learn to separate emotions from practical execution. This was just another project requiring efficient resolution, and I had all the tools necessary to handle it properly. First priority, credit cards. I logged into my banking portal and removed Chloe as an authorized user from both of my credit cards. The deactivation was immediate. Any cards in her wallet were now just expensive pieces of plastic. Next, the BMW payment was due in 4 days, so I canceled the automatic payment immediately. She could figure out how to cover the $650 monthly payment herself or deal with repossession. Since I had co-signed the lease, they'd eventually come after me, but I'd handle that bridge when I came to it. Her apartment lease was entirely in my name since her credit couldn't qualify her for a studio apartment, let alone an uptown loft. I found the termination clause in the contract, 60 days notice plus 2 months penalty. I drafted a termination email and sent it with a timestamp for my records. Then came all the subscriptions and services. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify Premium, that boutique gym membership with the spa, meal kit delivery, organic grocery delivery, art supply subscriptions. I changed passwords and canceled everything. The phone line on my family plan got an immediate removal request. Next priority was dealing with our wedding. We had our date set for October. The venue was booked, caterer confirmed, photographer paid, the whole 9 yards. I called every single vendor and canceled everything. I lost almost $21,000 in non-refundable deposits. But that was still better than the $52,000 total cost of marrying someone who wanted nothing more to do with me. Kevin was helping me make some of the cancellation calls, and after I hung up with the florist, he said, 21 grand down the drain. At least you're not married to her yet. The engagement ring situation was trickier, but I had that covered too. That $18,000 custom sapphire was legally mine until we actually got married. It's called a conditional gift under state law. I called my lawyer Phil about it first thing the next morning. Phil is the kind of guy who's been sued by his own HOA and came out with the deed to the neighborhood. His response was immediate. Engagement rings are conditional gifts. No marriage, no permanent gift. You have every legal right to demand its return. I sent Chloe a formal letter requesting immediate return of the ring. Her response was predictable. You gave this to me, it's mine. I'm not giving back something that represents your commitment to me. Phil filed a civil action for return of property, and the judge ruled in our favor within 2 weeks. Chloe had to surrender the ring or face contempt of court charges. I got my ring back and sold it to the original jeweler for $14,500. Still a loss, but better than letting her keep an $18,000 reminder of her betrayal. Then came the special part. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out every single loan agreement Chloe had signed over the past 6 years. I had them all organized chronologically with payment records and interest calculations. The total amount owed was $138,000. I spent 2 hours drafting a formal debt collection letter that would have made any collections attorney proud. I listed every loan with dates, amounts, and current balances, including 6% annual interest as specified in our agreements. I attached copies of every signed document. The letter was professional, cold, and absolutely devastating. I demanded full repayment within 30 days, or I would begin formal collection proceedings, including credit reporting and potential wage garnishment. I sent it via certified mail to her apartment address. The whole process took about 3 hours from start to finish. When I was done, I felt a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't experienced in months. Kevin watched me work through the entire process, and his final assessment was perfect. Bro, you just turned a breakup into a business transaction. That's either genius or psychotic, probably both. The silence that followed lasted exactly 1 week. I figured she was probably living it up with her new man, thinking she'd successfully upgraded from me to someone better. Boy, was she wrong about that. Friday afternoon, my phone absolutely exploded with incoming messages. I can only imagine the scene at Nordstrom when Chloe's card got declined. Someone somewhere definitely got quite a show when a princess had her very public financial meltdown mid-bag swipe. The texts came one after another. What the hell did you do to my cards? I'm at Nordstrom and my card got declined. This is humiliating. Then, you can't just cut someone off without warning. We were engaged. Followed by, I never said I didn't love you. I just needed space to figure things out. And then, you're being a vindictive asshole. This isn't how adults handle breakups. Then the tone shifted to pure delusion. I deserve better than someone who would do this to me. And finally, the piece of information I'd been waiting for. Blake says what you're doing is financial abuse. He's going to help me get a lawyer. Ah, Blake. The mysterious someone else finally had a name. Now I had something concrete to work with. I didn't respond to any of her messages. Why would I? She'd made it crystal clear that she wanted nothing more to do with me, and I was simply respecting her wishes exactly as stated. Monday brought the real fireworks. She called me 17 times. 17. I let every single call go to voicemail, and the messages were an incredible journey through the 5 stages of grief compressed into digital format. The messages started pleading. You're ruining my life. I have commitments. People expecting me at events. Then confused. My internship coordinator wants to know why I missed the gallery meeting. What am I supposed to tell them? Then absolutely unhinged. Blake thinks you're probably breaking laws. Financial abuse is a real crime. And finally, my sister says you're just bitter and trying to punish me for being honest about my feelings. Tuesday afternoon, the certified mail receipt confirmed delivery of my debt collection letter. I could practically feel the chaos that was about to unfold. Wednesday morning at 6:30 a.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered, and Chloe's voice came through absolutely screaming. You psycho! $138,000? Are you out of your mind? I hung up immediately and blocked the number. But the real entertainment was just getting started. Thursday evening, I was at Kevin's place when my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Madison standing there with what appeared to be a notebook and pen, like she was conducting some kind of official investigation. Kevin looked out the window and grinned. Is that the purple-haired communist? This should be good. I opened the door, and Madison immediately launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. I am disgusted by you, she announced, actually reading from her notebook. What you're doing to Chloe is textbook financial abuse and emotional manipulation. I just stared at her for a moment. Are you seriously reading that from notes? This isn't a joke, she continued, still consulting her notebook. You're destroying a woman's life because your fragile male ego can't handle rejection. So when your parents pay for your apartment, car, phone, groceries, tuition, and spring break trips, that's family support, I said calmly. But when I support my fiancé's career dreams with documented loans, that's financial abuse. Yes, because you're using money to control her choices, she shot back. I couldn't help but laugh. Madison, you literally live in an apartment your parents pay for, drive a car they bought you, and use a credit card they fund. How is that different from what Chloe had with me? Because my parents don't expect me to have sex with them, she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. Neither did I said calmly. I expected her to honor the loan agreements she signed. Madison was practically vibrating with indignation. You think you owned her because you paid for things? No, I think she owes me because she signed contracts saying she'd pay me back if we broke up. Madison slammed her notebook shut with dramatic flair. This conversation is over. You're clearly too toxic and manipulative to see what you're doing. But karma is real, and you're going to get what's coming to you. She stormed off to her parents' Honda Civic and peeled out of my driveway like she was fleeing a crime scene. I went back inside, and Kevin was grinning from ear to ear. Dude, that was incredible. She brought notes to argue with you. Actual notes. Friday morning brought an email from Robert J. Bobby, attorney at law, with the subject line, Urgent Cease Harassment of Miss Chloe Vance. Bobby's email was pure amateur hour. Lots of threatening language about predatory lending practices and financial coercion, but absolutely zero actual legal substance. He demanded that I immediately cease all collection activities and restore Miss Vance's financial access. I forwarded the entire email to my attorney, Mr. Phil, who'd been handling my business contracts for years. Phil has the energy of a man who's been sued by his own HOA and came out with the deed to the entire neighborhood. His response was swift and absolutely brutal. Phil sent Bobby copies of every single loan agreement with Chloe's signatures clearly visible, along with bank records showing all transfers and payments. His letter basically said, "Your client signed valid contracts and received valuable consideration. The loans are legitimate and enforceable under state law." It was a legal masterpiece that left no room for argument. Kevin read Bobby's original email over my shoulder and shook his head. This guy calls himself a lawyer? I've seen better legal arguments in YouTube comments. Meanwhile, the consequences were hitting Chloe hard in ways that were both predictable and satisfying. Her BMW got repossessed from the gallery parking lot during some networking event she was attending. Apparently, Blake tried to intervene, telling the repo guys that he was handling the situation, and they needed to show some respect. They told him to move or get arrested for interfering with a lawful repossession. Chloe had to start taking Ubers everywhere, which was eating into whatever money Blake was providing, assuming he was actually providing any. Speaking of Blake, I started doing some research on this guy who thought he could step into my shoes. It turns out Blake was a mid-level real estate agent who sold himself as some big shot developer. His Instagram was absolutely full of photos with expensive cars that clearly weren't his in construction job sites where he was probably just doing showings for clients. He was the classic fake it till you make it wannabe entrepreneur. But Blake was apparently all in on playing the white knight role. He started posting on social media about predatory men who use money to control women and the importance of standing up for what's right. Kevin's reaction to Blake's Instagram was priceless. This guy's more fake than a $3 bill. Look at this photo, that's not even his car. You can see the dealer plates if you zoom in. Madison was sharing all of Blake's posts with long captions about toxic masculinity and economic violence. Her Instagram became a daily lecture series about my supposed crimes against womankind. The irony was completely lost on her. The best part was when Chloe's sister Jessica decided to get involved in the drama. She sent me a long, rambling email about how I was destroying an innocent woman's life and how real men don't abandon their responsibilities. Jessica's email was peak entitlement. Chloe gave you 6 years of her life. She supported your career by being the perfect partner. You owe her for emotional labor and opportunity costs. I forwarded Jessica's email to Kevin, and his response was immediate. Emotional labor? What's next? Charging you for breathing the same air. But Madison wasn't done with her activism campaign. She organized what she called a support circle for Chloe, which was basically a group of her graduate school friends who would sit around validating each other's victim narratives. They started a private Facebook group called Supporting Survivors of Financial Abuse, where they shared articles about economic domestic violence and posted screenshots of my threatening debt collection letter. The property management company confirmed Chloe's eviction date. She had 30 days to get out of the apartment. Blake was apparently promising to find her something even better, but given his actual financial situation versus his Instagram persona, that seemed highly unlikely. The real entertainment started when we scheduled her belongings pickup. Just like with any business transaction, I hired neutral movers and required Bobby's supervision to ensure she only took personal items that actually belonged to her. But this time, Chloe brought the whole entourage. Blake, Jessica, Madison, and some other guy Jessica introduced as her business partner. Madison showed up with a protest sign that said, "Financial abuse is domestic violence," and started live streaming the whole thing on Instagram. Kevin couldn't come to the moving day because he had work. But when I told him about Madison's protest sign, he completely lost it. She made a sign? What's next, a megaphone? Moving day was supposed to be simple. Chloe gets her personal stuff, leaves my property, and we never see each other again. But when you're dealing with delusional, entitled people, aided by a wannabe activist with a smartphone, nothing is ever simple. The moving crew arrived at 10:30 a.m. sharp. Madison immediately started her commentary for Instagram. "We're here to document the ongoing financial abuse perpetrated by a toxic male who thinks he owns women." Blake tried to take charge of the situation, introducing himself to the movers as the new man in charge here, and explaining that they'd be taking some additional items beyond what was on the pre-approved list. The lead mover, a no-nonsense guy named Billy, just looked at Bobby and asked, "Is this clown authorized to make decisions?" Bobby confirmed that only items on the pre-approved list could be removed from the apartment. Blake's face went red with embarrassment and anger. "That's ridiculous. Chloe has been living here for years." Madison started recording Blake's little speech. This is exactly what we're talking about. The patriarchal assumption that men get to decide what women deserve. That's when Chloe started her performance. She walked through the apartment, pointing at everything like she was conducting some kind of auction. "This bookshelf was chosen specifically for my art books," she declared dramatically. "That desk was for my studies. Billy wasn't having any of it. Ma'am, if it's not on my list, it doesn't leave this apartment." Madison got right in Billy's face with her phone. "Sir, you're participating in economic violence against a woman." Billy just stared at her with the expression of a man who dealt with crazy people before. "Lady, I think you need to step back before I call the cops." Jessica decided to escalate the situation. "This is theft. You're stealing from a woman who gave 6 years of her life to this man." "6 years of her life?" I said calmly. "You mean 6 years of me paying for her life?" Madison spun around with her phone like she'd caught me in some kind of confession. "There he is, the financial abuser himself." "I'm not destroying anything," I said, maintaining my calm tone. "I'm collecting on legitimate debt." "Debt doesn't exist in relationships!" Madison screamed into her phone. "Love isn't transactional." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "Love isn't transactional, but loans are, that's literally what makes them loans." Blake stepped forward like he was going to physically intimidate me. This guy was maybe 5'8" inches and looked like he'd never been in a real fight in his life. "You need to step back and let us handle this situation." I almost laughed out loud. "Handle what situation? You can't even handle your own car payments based on your credit report." "Oh yeah, I'd run a credit check on Blake. Credit score of 580, 3 late car payments in the last 6 months, maxed out credit cards." Madison was practically hyperventilating. "You ran a credit check? That's stalking." "It's public information," I explained calmly. "Anyone can run a credit check with basic personal details." "You're a predator!" she shrieked. That's when Chloe completely lost it. She started screaming about how I was destroying her life out of spite and how Blake is twice the man you'll ever be. She grabbed the custom bookshelf and tried to drag it toward the door. Billy stepped in immediately. "Ma'am, that item isn't on the list. This is my bookshelf. I picked it out specifically for my art collection. According to the lease agreement and my records, this bookshelf was purchased with funds I provided under the loan agreement signed on March 15th, 2019, I stated matter-of-factly. Bobby tried to intervene. "My client has established residency here. She has rights to communal property. Your client has established tenancy in an apartment lease that's entirely in my name," I replied. "She has no ownership rights to furnishings purchased with my documented loans." Madison was now recording everything while screaming about patriarchal property laws and how the entire legal system was designed to oppress women. The moving crew finished up and left with just Chloe's personal belongings. No furniture, no electronics, no art supplies, nothing that I had purchased. Blake was absolutely fuming about the injustice, but there was nothing he could actually do about it. Madison kept live streaming until Bobby told her to stop or face legal action for harassment. Jessica was taking notes, claiming she was documenting evidence for a future lawsuit, but her business partner guy just looked embarrassed and kept checking his phone like he wanted to be anywhere else. After they all finally left, I felt this weird sense of relief, like I'd finally closed a chapter that should have ended months ago. Chloe's credit was now flagged with a $138,000 outstanding debt. She couldn't get approved for an apartment lease, a car loan, or even a decent credit card. Blake, it turns out, was living in a studio apartment and driving a leased Honda with 3 months of back payments. His developer lifestyle was completely fake, all Instagram smoke and mirrors. When Chloe moved in with him, his landlord immediately served them both with eviction notices for violating the single occupancy lease terms. The art world drama reached a whole new level when Chloe started telling people that I was holding her hostage with fraudulent debt. But Phil had been proactive about protecting my reputation. He'd sent copies of all the loan agreements to her former internship coordinator, along with a formal notice that any defamatory statements would result in additional legal action. Her reputation in the local art scene was getting systematically destroyed. Gallery directors started warning each other about the intern who created toxic drama and made false abuse allegations. Word travels fast in tight-knit professional circles, and Chloe's behavior was becoming well known for all the wrong reasons. A week later, I swung by a gallery showing that one of my clients was sponsoring. I wasn't planning some kind of revenge appearance. I genuinely liked the artist's work. But the second I walked through the door, there she was. Chloe was standing under some pretentious LED sculpture, fake laughing at something someone had said. The moment she saw me, the atmosphere became incredibly awkward. A curator I knew nodded at me and said under his breath, "Really appreciate the heads up about that situation. That could have been a disaster for us." It was clear that Phil's preemptive communications had worked exactly as intended. And then, like clockwork, Madison materialized from behind a twisted steel art piece like some cursed video game character. "What are you doing here?" she hissed at me. "Enjoying the art," I replied calmly. "You should try it sometime." "You're not welcome here," she declared, with all the authority of someone who definitely didn't work at the gallery. "Neither is fraud, yet here you are, loud as ever," I responded. She looked around nervously. There were clearly other guests watching our exchange. No live stream this time, no phone in her hand, just silence and the uncomfortable glare of acrylic lighting. I stayed for about 10 more minutes, complimented the artist on their work, and made small talk with a few reasonable people. On my way out, I caught Chloe fake laughing a little louder to no one in particular, like she was still trying to sell the illusion that everything was fine. But the gallery crowd was already done buying it. Madison's activism campaign backfired spectacularly. Her live stream videos got reported for harassment, and her Instagram account got suspended. Someone had posted her parents' address online with a note about trust fund babies pretending to be oppressed. Her parents apparently had a serious conversation with her about representing the family appropriately and cut off her funding as a consequence. The final nail in the coffin came when Jessica tried to start a GoFundMe for Chloe's recovery from financial abuse. She managed to raise exactly $180 before someone reported it for fraud, and the platform shut it down. Madison shared the fundraiser with a long caption about mutual aid for survivors, but even her graduate school friends could see through the obvious scam. Madison ended up transferring to a different graduate program after her academic advisor apparently expressed concerns about her professional judgment and social media presence. Academic institutions don't appreciate students who create public drama that reflects poorly on the program. The debt collection process is ongoing. Phil set up automatic credit reporting, so every month Chloe's credit score drops a little more. She'll either have to pay up eventually or declare bankruptcy, which would completely destroy any chance of ever working in the professional art world, where reputation and financial stability matter. 3 months later, I thought this whole saga was finally over. I'd moved back into my own place and was focused on growing my business. Then came what would be the final confrontation. It was a Saturday night, and Kevin was over at my place. We were playing Call of Duty when my doorbell rang around 9:30 p.m. Biscuit immediately started barking his head off. I looked through the peephole and saw Chloe standing there, looking like she'd been living rough for weeks. "Yo, it's your psycho ex," I told Kevin. "No shit," he replied, pausing the game. "Let her in. I want to watch this train wreck." I opened the door, and Chloe immediately pushed past me into my apartment like she still lived there. "We need to talk," she screamed. "You ruined my entire life." "You need to leave. We have nothing to discuss," I replied calmly. "I'm homeless because of you. Blake dumped me. My sister won't let me stay at her place anymore. I'm living in my car." Kevin paused the game and turned around with obvious entertainment. "Oh damn, this is live entertainment." Chloe spun around and glared at him. "This isn't funny. Your brother destroyed my life over money. And he gave you 6 years of free rent, free car, free everything," Kevin shot back. "What's the problem?" "The problem is that he's making me pay him back $138,000. "Should have thought about that before you signed the contracts," I said matter-of-factly. "I never thought we'd break up. Those contracts were just formalities." "And I loved you. Then you dumped me via text for another guy. Actions have consequences." That's when she completely lost it. She started screaming about how Blake dumped her when the eviction notice came, how her sister Jessica said she could only stay for a week, and how Madison wasn't even returning her calls anymore. "You turned everyone against me. My credit is ruined. No one will rent to me." "You're problematic because you tried to steal furniture and claimed I was financially abusing you," I explained. "That's not my fault. Kevin was having the time of his life. Your ex is having a full meltdown because she found out actions have consequences." "Shut up, this is between me and him." "Actually, this is my apartment and you're trespassing," I said firmly. "You need to leave." "I'm not leaving until you forgive the debt. I can't pay it back. I'm working at a coffee shop." That's when Kevin pulled out his phone. "All right, this situation seems unstable. 911? Yeah, hi, I've got an unstable individual at my brother's apartment. She's screaming, refusing to leave, making threats." Chloe's eyes went wide with panic. You called the cops? The police showed up about 10 minutes later. Two officers who both looked like they'd dealt with domestic drama many times before. What seems to be the problem here? The first officer asked professionally. This woman is my ex-fiancée, I explained calmly. She's trespassing in my apartment and refusing to leave when asked. I'm not making a scene, Chloe screamed, which immediately proved my point about her mental state. The second officer looked at her sternly. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. He let me in. But when you were asked to leave, did you leave? The officer pressed. I can't leave. He's ruining my life. The officers looked at each other. This was clearly not their first crazy ex-girlfriend call. Ma'am, this sounds like a civil matter. What we have here is a trespassing situation. You need to leave this apartment immediately. But he's financially abusing me. Kevin couldn't help himself. Officer, she broke up with him via text after 6 years, then tried to keep all the stuff he bought her. Now she's mad that he wants his loans repaid. Ma'am, you need to leave now, or we'll have to escort you out, the first officer said firmly. This isn't fair. I have nowhere to go. That's not this gentleman's problem, the officer replied. You have two choices. Leave voluntarily or leave in handcuffs. Fine, but this isn't over. I'll find a way to fight this. As the officers escorted her toward the door, she started screaming, You're a monster! The door shut behind them. Kevin let out a long fart, nobody said anything about it, and we just went back to our game like nothing had happened. That was the most entertaining Saturday night I've had in years, Kevin muttered. Your ex just got dragged off like a screeching possum. The next morning, I went straight to the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. I cited the trespassing, the refusal to leave when asked, the threats, and the general unhinged behavior. The judge approved it without any hesitation. Chloe now legally has to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, and my workplace. If she violates it, she goes directly to jail. Do I feel bad about how it all ended? Not even a little bit. She made her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. The next weekend, Kevin came over with a couple of drinks and an idea that perfectly captured the moment. You know what this situation calls for? He said, gesturing toward the garage. A victory lap. I looked at him with understanding. You want to take the charger out? Damn right I do. We just watched 6 years of bullshit finally get flushed down the toilet. He had a point that resonated deeply with me. 20 minutes later, we pulled the cover off the 1969 Charger. She looked as beautiful as ever, sitting there like a monument to everything I'd worked for and everything I'd preserved through this entire ordeal. Kevin slid into the passenger seat. Biscuit hopped into the back with his usual enthusiasm, and I fired her up. That V8 growl echoed through the garage like a declaration of independence. We pulled out onto the street, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. No drama, no contracts, no entitled people demanding things they hadn't earned. You know, Kevin said as we cruised down the open road, 6 months ago, you were engaged to someone who wanted you to sell this car. Now you're free to drive it whenever you want. That's not just dodging a bullet, bro. That's dodging a whole artillery barrage. He was absolutely right. If I'd married Chloe, the Charger would probably be gone by now, sold for something practical and eco-friendly and boring as hell. Instead, she was safe in my garage, waiting for the next adventure, representing everything I'd built and preserved. As we drove through the city with the windows down and that beautiful engine purring beneath us, I realized this wasn't just about a car. It was about maintaining my identity, my values, and my right to make decisions about my own life and property. The Charger represented the bond Kevin and I had built over years of working together, the satisfaction of restoring something beautiful from nothing, and the freedom to enjoy the fruits of my labor without someone constantly telling me what I should sacrifice for their vision of our future. That's the end of the story. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well and protecting what you've built, while others destroy themselves with their own poor decisions and sense of entitlement. TLDR. Built a successful business, supported my fiancé's dreams with documented loans for 6 years. She dumped me via text for another guy. I legally collected on $138K in debt and watched her life implode while I drove off into the sunset in my restored Charger with my brother and my dog.